Want to sew a cute little Easter egg with me? I'm Christy Lee from Quiet Play, and I love to foundation paper piece. If you too love FPP, this is the pattern for you. It's fun, it's free, it's foundation pieced, and it's the cutest little 3-inch Easter egg that you've ever seen. It's perfect for fussy cutting, so you can dive into the stash and find those favorite prints, or you can go nuts, use your tone on tone, your blenders, your favorite prints, whatever your heart desires to make the cutest little Easter egg. If you're not too confident in your foundation piecing skills, don't worry, I've got you covered. Watch on for the video and I'll do a step-by-step guide on how to create your own little Easter egg. The pattern is free, it's all yours. Details are below, there's a link, click it, do all the fun stuff, make the pattern yours, and come and sew some Easter eggs with me. To get started, you need to print off the template. Now make sure it's printing to 100%, actual size, no scaling, no margins. You may need to look around the settings in your printer to check what fits for yours. Each printer is very different, but those are the general things you want to look for. Because with foundation paper piecing, your templates are the actual size you're going to be sewing, you need to make sure your templates are correct. Now, we're making a 3-inch block for this cute little Easter egg. That's the finished size. So that's what it would be if you were to join it in with other blocks. Unfinished, it will measure 3.5-inch square. That's because we've got a 1/4-inch seam allowance on each side. So the bold line here will be the edge of your block when it's finished. The dashed line on the outside, that's your seam allowance. So if you're not 100% sure if it's the correct size, just grab your ruler, measure to the outside dotted lines. We just want to check that that has come up to 1, 2, 3.5, and it has. And 1, 2, 3.5. And that is the correct size, ready to sew. You only need 2 fabrics for this, one for your Easter egg and one for your background. Use a cute tone on tone or a blender fabric, or fussy cut a cute little print, which is what I'm going to do. If you are fussy cutting, make sure you allow enough space around the center motif that you plan to have in the middle of your Easter egg, so that you'll have enough room for seam allowance on all sides. This square to cover the Easter egg it's a rectangle, needs to measure 2.5 inches by 3 inches, and that will give you enough space to give you seam allowance on all the edges. Next, for your background fabric, you need 1.5 inches times width of fabric. It's probably more than you'll need. We probably won't use the entire strip, but it's better to have too much than not enough. First thing we'll do is dial down the stitch length. So when I first started up the machine, it's sitting at 2.5. I like to turn mine down to about 1.4. You can get away with 1.5, but 1.4, the stitches are a bit better. It's easier to remove the paper at the end. Before I start sewing, I like to cut my fabrics to size. Now, our center part for the Easter egg, we've already cut that to size with our 2.5 by 3-inch rectangle, but we can cut our background fabric to size. So what I do with this is I have a look at each section in order, and then I rough cut the fabric to fit. So for A2, it's only a little small bit there. You can hold your fabric over it like that. You can see it's not a huge amount of fabric, and then just rough cut. So that will be A2. I put it face down on my desk, ready to sew. I like to stack my fabrics up in order. So there's A3. Let's measure, remembering you want to allow a 1/4-inch seam allowance either end of your line. So don't cut too small. It's always bigger with foundation paper piecing to cut a bigger piece of fabric than you think you're going to need. Right, A4, and then just go ahead and cut through the rest of them so that you have all your fabrics ready in a stack over here, ready to sew. Fabrics are all cut and in order. So A1 is the top one, then it'll go to A2, A3, all the way through to A17. And I like to keep that stacked next to my sewing machine so I can grab it as I'm piecing. That's all that I had left from that width of fabric. So for that strip, that's handy in case I make any mistakes and need to replace a piece. And like I said, I'd always rather have a little bit more fabric than not enough. All right, let's start sewing. When you're foundation paper piecing, you sew on the printed side of the template. your fabric will appear on the unprinted side. It feels a little bit backwards, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be fine. So we start with A1, which is our Easter egg print, my cute little bunny. So turn your paper over, unprinted side, lay your fabric down, and you want to try and center it. Now, if I turn this over, you can see where my little bunny is, and I can adjust accordingly to make sure there is a 1/4 inch of fabric around each of these lines. Now I'm holding mine up to the window there so I can see quite easily, but you can also use a light box, whatever works for you. Then pop your pin to hold that fabric in place. Now just be sure your pin isn't over where you're going to sew your first line. So I'm going to be sewing the A2 section on. So my pin is down here out of the way so we're not sewing over any pins. If you don't want to pin it, a little dab of glue will do a great job as well. All right, so our first fabric from my pre-cut pile of fabric there, A2, it's only a little section. So what you can do before you even start sewing, sorry, I should have mentioned this, is you can fold your templates on the line so you know where you're going to be placing the fabric. So you can see I've just folded across the A2 line there, and that's put a little crease in my fabric. Turn your fabric right side down, flick your fabric back and forth so you can see the A2 section. It's only small. And you're going to put your fabric across that line. You need at least a 1/4 inch of fabric across that folded line because that's where we're stitching, and then we'll need to open it up. You don't want to skimp on your seam allowance, and this is why I always recommend cutting bigger than you think. We're ready to sew. Now I'm holding my fabrics in place with my fingers. You can pin it, again, keep the pin away from where we're going to sew, just so that you can hold them in place. Tip it upside down so that the paper side, the printed side of the paper rather, is up. Then we're going to stitch. Now I've already got my thumb on the back stitch button because I like to back stitch within the lines on this. So I just do a couple stitches back and forth, and then I do to the end and a couple back and forth stitches just to anchor my stitches. This is a personal preference. But that's how I like to do it. I don't like my stitches going into the next sections. I like to keep them nice and tidy. Now, we've sewn our first piece. It's actually going to open out like that, but we need to get rid of this messy bit of fabric here first. So fold your template back, pull your threads to the side and the fabric, and then you're just going to trim. Now, I should add, I'm a lazy paper piecer, so I like to do this at the machine because it saves time. You can, of course, use an 1/4 ruler, take it to your rotary cutter and mat and trim it all precisely, or you can wing it like me and just eyeball it and go 1/4 inch seam, looks good to me. So there's that part trimmed. Now we flick that piece of fabric back so it's covering where that A2 section is. Then I like to use this tool called a finger presser. You place your block down, open the fabric out, and just smooth over that section. It just keeps it nice and flat and saves you having to go to the ironing board to iron it in place. Now I've got a stitch in place, so I can take that pin out now. And we're going to do the line here between A2 and A3. So I'll grab it from my pile. You can see it's cut long enough that there will be a 1/4 inch seam allowance either end of the line. Turn it back over. Again, feel free to fold on that line if you need the guidance to have the folding line. I've been doing this for a while, so I just tend to wing it. Fold it back just so you can see where that line is. Place your fabric over the top. Make sure you've got a 1/4 inch either side of the line. Then pop it underneath the presser foot and let's stitch. Now, again, I do the back stitch at the beginning and the end. And this is the beauty of foundation paper piecing. It's pretty much rinse and repeat. There's our line, fold the paper back, move your threads and fabric out of the way, and trim them back 1/4 inch. Okay, there's my paper straightened out. There's my fabric pressed out. Again, handy dandy finger presser. or you can use the iron if you like, but trust me, the finger presser will save you so much time. All right, A2, A3, A4. And see, this piece is bigger again, so I've got enough for a 1/4 inch seam allowance either end of the line. Starting to see the pattern here. We just rinse and repeat. So we're going to place that over, make sure 1/4 inch. So your 1/4 inch seam allowance is the key part. Then we're going to pop it down, stitch in place. Now, some people really like to stitch past that line. I don't, and I'll tell you why. Because if you stitch past that line down here, when you join all your lines together, the paper is going to get stuck in it, and it's very frustrating. So when you're removing the paper at the end, it's a lot harder. Whereas if you keep it in the lines, your paper will just rip off straight on the lines, and it's right. So we're back to those steps again. Fold your paper down, move your threads and the fabric to the side, trim it back to that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then open out your fabric, finger press into position. You can start to see the top curve of our egg is starting to take shape. Now, it'll be very boring if I explain every single one of these 17 steps to you, because it's exactly the same. So we've done this side. Now I'll go over and work here, A5, A6, A7. It's basically paint by number, but in fabric. And then we'll do this curve, this one, and then I'll come back when we do the straight sections. Our little Easter egg is starting to take shape. We just need to add the borders. Now, it's starting to look a bit messy and untidy on the back. So go ahead and give those threads a trim. You can trim as you go. I like to sort of do it all at once because it's not a particularly fun job. So sort of gather them up, give it a bit of a haircut, and the back will be looking a lot more tidy. All right, now we're going to add the borders on. Again, we are still sewing the exact same way. This is just nice and easy because we just have simple rectangle strips. Do make sure your fabric is going to be big enough for this section and all the way out to this seam allowance, because you need to have it out past this line. So you can see my fabric covers both the line I'm going to sew on and the outside line. So that's important, especially as you get towards the edge of blocks. So lay your fabric down, checking that you have a 1/4 inch on each side. Pretty much exactly what we've been doing for all the rest of the other steps. Stitch it into place. Fold that paper back. Give it a trim. All right, fold your fabric back. Again, I use that finger presser. It is probably my #1 tool I use when I'm foundation piecing. Okay, you can see my fabric is well over, which is great. We don't want it to be short and have little bits missing out of our seam allowance when our block's finished. So go ahead, do the same for the other 3 borders, and then your block will be done. Ta-da! Cute little Easter egg. We're not quite finished yet though, so like don't break out the champagne. We've still got a little bit to go. You can see it's all over the outside here. It's a bit messy and untidy. I'm going to give this a good press, and then I'm going to show you how we trim it up with the rotary cutter at the mat. Freshly ironed, nice, crisp, tidy seams. However, our block is still looking messy because it's trimming time. So when you are trimming your foundation piece block, you always go to the outer line. That's your seam allowance. See this bold line on the inside? That's where you'll sew if you join this block to something else. So you do not want to cut here, or otherwise your block is suddenly going to be a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch too short. Always cut on the outer line. Right, just pop your ruler over it, line up, and if it's printed correctly, it will have printed an exact 1/4 inch. All right, let's do it. This one's nice and easy because it's a square and we're just doing this on all 4 sides. Sometimes if you have more complex blocks, they'll have little more weird shaped angles that you need to cut around, but this one, super simple. And look at this, my friends. Tidy on the back, tidy on the front. Cute little Easter egg, ready to turn into an Easter basket, a cute little table runner. Who knows? You're only limited by your imagination, or so they say. Cute bunny, ready for you to sew.